When I first drove down the winding desert road that led to my inherited acreage, I nearly slammed on the brakes at the sight before me. There, in place of the open landscape I remembered from my childhood, stood row upon row of identical beige houses. A large sign proclaiming "Welcoming you to Valley Bloom Estates, HOA managed by Karen," dangled proudly from two tall posts, and it almost felt like a parody of a suburban paradise. My heart pounded so hard that I half expected the dust around me to tremble. Who in their right mind would build 120 homes on my private property without so much as a phone call? I parked the truck near what appeared to be a freshly paved cul-de-sac, noticing the unnaturally uniform lawns surrounding each house. Perfect squares of green grass shimmered under the scorching Arizona sun. It was as though someone had transplanted a piece of suburban heaven onto a desert canvas. The thought unnerved me. Months had passed since I last visited, but I never suspected that an entire community could pop up so quickly. I stepped out, my boots kicking up small clouds of dust, and took a slow glance at the symmetrical streets, each bearing a sign in a flowery script: Saguaro Blossom Lane, Ocotillo Dreams Court, Agave Vista Circle. The cheerful names felt almost taunting. My name is Ethan James, I'm 42, and I inherited this land from my grandfather 2 years ago. He left it to me as a gesture of gratitude for the time I spent helping him with his small ranch. I'm no stranger to conflict. My job as a forensic investigator in corporate fraud taught me to look beyond what's on the surface, but never did I think I'd unravel a fraudulent scheme on my own property. My grandfather had always warned me about unscrupulous developers, but this was beyond anything I'd imagined. 120 homes, a brand new HOA, and a sign naming someone called Karen as the one in charge. I forced myself to move, scanning for any sign of human life amid the eerily neat houses. As I walked, I noticed real estate flyers protruding from a fancy metal stand. The flyer boasted, "Valley Bloom Estates, Phase 3, now available, managed by the renowned HOA expert Karen Ellington." The words bristled on the page. That name, Karen, sounded strangely familiar, though I couldn't place it immediately. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The caller ID said unknown. I hesitated, then tapped the screen to answer. "Hello?" There was silence at first, then a woman's voice, sharp and insistent. "Mr. James? I'm so glad you finally showed up. I was beginning to think we'd have to mark your land as abandoned. Karen here. I manage the HOA that has so diligently revitalized this region. The real estate office is near the Central Park. Meet me there in 10 minutes. Before I could ask a single question, the call ended. I stared down at my phone, anger flaring inside my chest. She must have known I'd arrive eventually, and she was far too smug for someone who appeared to have built an entire neighborhood on stolen land. But if she was bold enough to call me, she might also be arrogant enough to leave a trail I could follow. Minutes later, I strode across a quaint little park with manicured shrubs and artificial turf, heading toward a sleek building labeled Valley Bloom HOA headquarters. The structure had glass walls and a cool, modern design. It looked more suited to a corporate campus than a desert settlement. Standing by the entrance was a woman in her early 50s, petite yet radiating confidence, with stylish blonde hair pinned back and an air of authority that practically shimmered around her. She wore a navy blue suit and carried a clipboard in one hand. Her eyes pinned me the moment I stepped onto the curb. "Ethan James, it's about time," she said crisply, tilting her head in a gesture that managed to be both condescending and welcoming. "I'm Karen Ellington, president of the Valley Bloom Homeowners Association." Her voice had the same clipped cadence I recognized from the phone call. Up close, I noticed that her nails were done in a pale pink polish, meticulously maintained, reflecting an obsession with perfection. I took a moment to steady myself. "You've got a lot of nerve," I replied, crossing my arms. You built an entire community here without my knowledge or permission. This is private land. My private land. How did you even get permits for this? Because I can guarantee I never signed anything approving 120 homes." She offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes, then gestured toward the glass doors. "Let's discuss this inside, Ethan. I'm sure we can come to a reasonable arrangement." If her tone had been any more patronizing, I might have lost my composure right then and there. Instead, I followed her into the lobby, a polished space with marble flooring and framed photographs of various community events. The walls displayed pictures of Karen cutting ribbons at fancy ceremonies, shaking hands with local officials, and posing next to families who seemed thrilled to be her loyal HOA subjects. My stomach twisted with each step. Inside the main office, Karen directed me to sit in a sleek leather chair across from her imposing desk. She shut the door behind us. The silence that followed felt both thick and unnerving. She lowered herself into a large executive chair, steepling her fingers before speaking. "Let's be frank. Your grandfather's name is still on some county documents, but those are archaic records. We have an official contract that was sent to the address listed. An address, I might add, that no longer exists. Since there was no response, we proceeded through the appropriate channels to declare the land subject to HOA development. The county approved everything based on that contract." I leaned forward, gripping the arms of the chair so tightly that my knuckles shone white. "The county approved it because you fed them false information, or so I suspect. And you must have known that address was outdated. Don't pretend you weren't aware." She paused a beat, then gave a slow shrug that reeked of faux sympathy. "I understand your frustration, but we do everything by the book. If mail was returned, well, we can't spend our resources chasing down every potential heir who fails to update their records. That's not how a well-managed HOA operates." Her words made my ears burn. She spoke like a lecturer scolding a careless student. "This land has been in my family for generations. I have the deed, the will, everything that proves it belongs to me. Why on earth would I willingly forfeit it to an HOA? Karen's gaze flickered. I sensed a guarded edge. "Are you certain your grandfather didn't sign an easement or agreement at some point?" She placed a neat folder on the desk, tapping it with her manicured fingernail. "We have records that might indicate something to that effect. Perhaps he intended to do what was best for the local community. After all, we've created a thriving environment here. We've brought families, built amenities, and invested in the region's growth. It's not like we bulldozed your heritage for personal gain." The nerve of her was astounding. I reached over, snatching the folder without ceremony. Inside, I saw a flurry of documents referencing land acquisition, but the signatures were suspect at best. The handwriting in those signatures looked nothing like my grandfather's old scrawl. My jaw clenched tighter by the second, and though I wanted to throw these fraudulent pages in her face, I forced myself to remain calm. I was, after all, a trained investigator. "So this is how you operate? Send legal notices to a demolished address, wait for no reply, then file them as uncontested? Classic scam methodology. Don't feed me that for the community line. I know a scheme when I see one." Karen's smile hardened. "You can accuse us of anything you wish, Mr. James, but the fact remains that 120 families already call this place home. Are you prepared to uproot them, face the wrath of the local media for tearing apart a thriving neighborhood? Perhaps I can offer a fair buyout so we can all move forward peacefully. You'd avoid expensive litigation. We'd keep the harmony we've worked so diligently to establish." My heart pounded. I could see her angle. She wanted me to surrender quietly in exchange for hush money. I'd done this dance before while investigating shady corporate dealings. It always came down to intimidation and quick payoffs, orchestrated to keep dirty secrets hidden. I let silence fill the room for a moment, eyes locked on her in defiance, until I finally said, "I'm not interested in your hush money. You built this development illegally, and I intend to prove it. Karen's expression flickered with something akin to real concern, but she quickly masked it. I see, she said in a clipped tone. You'll be hearing from our attorneys then. Until you come around, I'd suggest you think very carefully about the consequences. She reached for her phone. I took it as my cue to leave. Storming out of that glass building, I felt adrenaline course through my veins. A scam of this magnitude had to involve more than just an overconfident HOA president. There had to be local officials, inspectors, possibly a developer with deep pockets. No one simply builds 120 homes in record time without serious backing. I intended to uncover every last name behind this scheme. The afternoon sun glared fiercely as I walked back toward my truck. A few residents, out for a stroll in the pastel twilight, gave me curious glances. Each house seemed identical except for minor differences in landscaping or exterior trim. How could these people buy property here without questioning who owned the land beneath their feet? It made me think. Either they were oblivious or they had been misled to believe everything was legitimate, possibly both. The thought that so many innocent homeowners might be caught in the crossfire added a layer of complexity to my growing anger. I decided to spend the evening reviewing the documents in that folder. I booked a motel room at the edge of town. The flickering neon sign outside my window provided a scant source of light as I pored over every legal sheet. With each page I noticed glaring inconsistencies, dates that didn't match up, signatures that looked hastily forged, notarized stamps from offices that no longer existed. Bits and pieces of an all-too-familiar puzzle slid into place. Karen's so-called official contract was built on a foundation of lies. Slamming the folder shut, I set my phone to record a voice memo. I needed to organize my thoughts systematically. Document anomalies, forged signatures, invalid notary stamps, suspicious timeline, potential collusion with county clerks or local officials, must investigate developer's role, someone financed these homes. Also, check old addresses, possibly an environmental factor given how quickly they built. Could be ignoring zoning or contamination issues. Let's see if there's a bigger angle. I ended the recording with a sigh, rubbed my tired eyes, and decided to call it a night. Tomorrow, I'd delve deeper. Whether Karen realized it or not, she'd stepped into a realm of fraud I specialized in unraveling. At dawn, I woke to a persistent knocking on my motel door. Opening it a crack, I spotted a wiry man in a county uniform, code enforcement. He held out an envelope. "Mr. Ethan James?" he asked, not meeting my eyes. I nodded. "Ma'am?" "That is, Ms. Ellington. Requested I deliver this letter to you first thing." Then he briskly departed. The envelope was sealed with a neat sticker bearing the Valley Bloom HOA. Inside, I found a notice stating that I was trespassing on HOA property the previous day, and that any further presence without official permission could result in legal action. It was pure intimidation, couched in formal language. I exhaled an incredulous laugh. They were trying to flip the script and accuse me, the rightful landowner, of trespassing. Shaking my head, I tossed the letter onto the bedside table, took a quick shower, and resolved to push forward. Step 1. See a friend of mine who worked at the local records office. If there was a paper trail implicating Karen or her associates, I was going to find it. The records department was located inside a drab municipal building downtown. My contact, Sarah Connor, no relation to any cinematic icons, was a clerk who had helped me in past investigations. She gave me a discreet nod as I entered and motioned me over to her workstation. "Ethan, I heard rumors about a land dispute, something about an HOA building a massive development?" I leaned in so as not to be overheard. "It's more than a dispute, it's a full-blown scam, I'm almost certain. I need to see if there's anything official in the archives about the transfer of my land to this Valley Bloom HOA. They call it Karen's domain." Sarah sighed, typed rapidly on her computer. I'll check the electronic records first. If there's a mismatch, we'll dig into microfilm. But you should know a lot of these new HOAs have private deals with local officials. Don't be surprised if stuff went missing or got amended behind the scenes. She scrolled through pages of data, frowning at intervals. Eventually, she shook her head. There is a record showing a notice of proposed development filed last year, referencing your grandfather's estate. The notice claims it was approved after no heirs contested it, but the weird part is that the official signature approving the final step belongs to a clerk who retired 2 years before the date on this document. That's a gigantic red flag. Gigantic indeed, I muttered, leaning closer. Any mention of a developer name, construction companies, someone had to put up the money for 120 homes. Sarah tapped a few more keys. There's a reference to Magnolia Builders, but no real detail. They filed for multiple permits in quick succession. Actually, wait, it looks like they changed their name halfway through the process. The older filings say Maple Leaf Construction. Very strange. My mind lit up. Changing business names mid-permit was a classic tactic for shady developers seeking to blur accountability. It spelled trouble. Could you print these records for me? I might have to verify them. Also, see if there's any note about environmental impact or special zoning. A minute later, Sarah handed me a thin stack of printouts. Strangely minimal, she said, tapping the pages. No mention of an environmental assessment. Usually for a project of that size, they'd have to do thorough checks. Something's definitely off here, Ethan. Keep me posted, okay? I thanked her, slipped the papers into a folder, and left the building with renewed resolve. The scorching midday heat pressed down on me as I headed to my truck. If I was right, not only had they stolen my land, but they'd also skirted every regulation meant to protect both property owners and the environment. That spelled potential disaster for the families now living there, and a moral imperative for me to get to the truth. My phone buzzed again, this time an unknown number that I decided to answer without hesitation. Ethan, my name is Kelly Ramirez. I used to work with Ms. Ellington. I heard you were investigating. Could we meet somewhere discreet? Her voice quavered, like she was either frightened or anxious. That alone convinced me to say yes. We agreed on a small diner by the highway, a place that served cheap coffee and offered anonymity. I arrived first, slid into a booth near the back and ordered a coffee that tasted more like warm dishwater. A few minutes later, a slim woman in her late 30s approached me. She had shadows under her eyes and carried a worn satchel. "Ethan?" she asked softly, and I nodded. She took a seat, looked around nervously, then leaned forward to speak in hushed tones. I was Karen's administrative assistant during the early days of Valley Bloom. Before that, I helped her set up smaller HOAs around the region. But I never imagined she'd do something like this. She's taken it to a new level. I studied her posture, noting how her fingers trembled as she took a sip of water. What do you mean by new level? Kelly pursed her lips, searching for the right words. She's always been ambitious, but something changed in the last year. She got in touch with a developer. I believe it was Maple Leaf Construction at first, and they formed an agreement to expand into bigger projects. Then, Maple Leaf turned into Magnolia Builders. Everything moved so quickly and the budgets ballooned, we never even performed an environmental review. We bribed certain officials to waive the requirements. Karen told me it was standard practice. My chest tightened. And my land? How did they justify building there? She sighed. Karen discovered that your grandfather's address on file was an old ranch house that got demolished. She sent out mandatory notices to that location, fully aware they'd be returned as undeliverable. Then, after a certain waiting period, she claimed that no one contested the development. That's how she got the county's default approval. She also forged a signature from a clerk who'd long since retired. Once she had that piece of paper, construction took off. I exhaled slowly, controlling my anger. And the families who moved in, they have no idea they're living on land that was basically stolen. They probably think they have legitimate titles. Kelly nodded, eyes downcast. Yes. They paid full price for those homes. Some used their life savings or big mortgages. Karen planned to expand even further, maybe double or triple the development. Something about mineral rights, too. I'm not entirely sure. She's unstoppable, or at least she thinks she is. I just want to do the right thing now. Her voice cracked. I believed she was genuinely remorseful. What made you quit? I asked gently. She lowered her gaze. I confronted her about forging signatures and ignoring environmental laws. She fired me on the spot and threatened to sue me for defamation if I spoke up. I've been looking over my shoulder ever since, but when I heard there was a man claiming rightful ownership of the entire property, I knew I had to reach out. I reached across the table and rested my hand on hers in a brief gesture of reassurance. Thank you for coming forward, Kelly. This helps. Listen, I need every document or piece of evidence you might have, emails, receipts, meeting notes, anything to trace the money or prove wrongdoing. She opened her satchel, withdrawing a small flash drive. It's all in here, copies of emails between Karen and the developer, along with some scanned documents that confirm the forging. It might not be everything, but it's what I managed to secure before she locked me out of the system. I felt the surge of relief. This could be exactly what I needed. I appreciate it, I said, sliding the flash drive into my jacket pocket. This might be dangerous for you. Are you safe? Kelly swallowed hard. I'll be staying with a cousin out of state for a while. I just want this madness to end. I thanked her again. As she left, my mind churned with next steps. I needed to examine the flash drive, cross-transmit it with the county records, then figure out a plan to expose Karen. But an additional question nagged at me. Why would Karen want to expand so aggressively on desert land? Sure, real estate can be profitable, but building in this arid region was risky, especially without a thorough environmental study. Could there be hidden resources underground? My grandfather once mentioned something about a rare aquifer beneath part of the property, or possibly mineral deposits. If Karen discovered that, she might stand to make a fortune well beyond real estate. I returned to my motel and immediately hooked up the flash drive to my laptop. It contained a trove of incriminating material. Among them were email chains with subject lines like, "Securing permits our way," and "Regarding Ethan James's land." My blood boiled reading a thread where Karen wrote, "If this Ethan surfaces, we'll pay him off or bury him in legal trouble. Either way, the land's ours to develop. The retirement signature trick worked once. We can replicate it if needed." It took me a moment to calm the rage pulsing through my veins. Her arrogance was breathtaking. Another set of emails between her and someone from Magnolia Builders outlined inflated construction costs. One note even said, "Use subpar materials for Phase 2 to cut corners. We'll collect homeowner fees to fix any unexpected issues later." It was a thorough con job, exploiting unsuspecting families, all while Karen reaped a windfall. I also found cryptic references to a geology report. Terms like substantial water table and potential mineral yields popped up repeatedly. My suspicion grew. Karen must have discovered my land's hidden natural resources, which likely explained her haste to seize it. If so, this wasn't just about building houses. It was about controlling a lucrative commodity buried deep beneath the desert soil. My heart pounded with renewed determination. They had no right to strip my grandfather's legacy for corporate greed. I needed an ally with legal might, someone who wouldn't be intimidated or bought off by Karen's crowd. My first instinct was to call an old friend, Marcus Dean, an attorney who specialized in real estate litigation. We'd worked together on fraud cases, and I trusted him to keep everything confidential. After a short phone call explaining the broad strokes, he asked to see every piece of evidence I had. The next morning, I drove to his modest office in a neighboring town, far from Valley Bloom's reach. Marcus listened intently as I laid out the entire situation, from the suspicious documents to Kelly's flash drive. His face grew increasingly grim. "Ethan, this is bigger than a simple property dispute," he said, removing his reading glasses. "We have fraud, forgery, environmental breaches, and likely corruption of public officials. This has RICO potential if the pattern extends beyond your case. But we must proceed carefully." We spent hours combing through emails, forging a plan. Step 1 was to file an injunction against further development. Step 2 would be a civil suit naming Karen, Magnolia Builders, and any officials who facilitated the scam. Marcus also suggested we quietly gather more homeowner stories, people who realized their homes might be on shaky legal ground. The challenge was that these families could resist joining us. They wouldn't want to risk losing their newly purchased properties, no matter how dubious the situation seemed. That night, back at the motel, I listened to the desert wind howl outside my window. It was a lonely sound, pressing in on me as I realized the uphill battle ahead. Meanwhile, I typed out a systematic timeline of events, identifying every angle. If Karen had ties to local officials, she might try to manipulate the court system. I needed more leverage, and that meant shining a bright spotlight on the corruption. The only way to beat well-funded schemers, in my experience, was public exposure, or ironclad evidence that forced authorities to act. I soon got my chance. A few days later, the local media caught wind of a brewing land dispute and reached out. I had to be strategic. Go public too soon and Karen might hide or destroy evidence. Wait too long and she'd have time to reinforce her alliances. I decided a carefully timed press conference could serve as a shield, making it harder for Karen to intimidate me. But first, I needed an inside look at Valley Bloom. That meant meeting actual residents and hearing their stories. Under the guise of being a prospective buyer, I arranged a tour with a local realtor assigned to the development. She took me around in a golf cart, proudly pointing out the uniform houses, the landscaped parks, and the pristine community pool. My heart ached seeing kids splashing, parents chatting on lounge chairs, and couples walking dogs, all presumably unaware of the precarious legal ground beneath them. The realtor, a chipper young woman named Melissa, had no clue I owned the entire property. She rattled on about how the esteemed HOA president, Ms. Karen Ellington, kept everything in perfect order. Then I asked a subtle question. What about the soil or water conditions? I heard some areas in this county are at risk for contamination or might have unique environmental statuses. Melissa hesitated, forced a bright smile. "Oh, we've done all the standard checks. Karen always ensures total compliance. Nothing to worry about." I nodded, feigning interest, but behind my polite smile, I wondered how many corners had been cut. Toward the end of the tour, I asked if I could talk to a couple of homeowners. Melissa introduced me to a middle-aged man named Roger who was fiddling with his sprinkler system. He seemed friendly enough, so I casually inquired how he liked living there. He paused, glancing around as if worried about being overheard, then admitted in a low voice, "It's mostly fine, but the HOA fees keep going up. They promised us no hikes for the first 5 years, but we've seen 2 increases in 6 months. And the materials inside the house, some of them are already showing wear. The builder keeps telling me it's normal settling, but I'm not so sure." His quiet complaint was a small crack in the perfect facade. I thanked him and drifted back to Melissa, mindful that Karen's network might have eyes everywhere. By the time the tour ended, I had a better sense of how deeply Karen had entrenched herself. A seemingly idyllic place, but under the surface, dissatisfaction and suspicion brewed. That evening, while combing through Kelly's flash drive again, I found a newly noticed folder labeled Subcontractors. Inside were scanned contracts with multiple small firms, each paid suspiciously high sums for minimal labor. It looked like a money laundering scheme. If Karen was funneling funds through phony subcontractors, it meant we had potential wire fraud in addition to everything else. The complexity of this entire operation stunned me. I updated Marcus, who told me to keep quiet about it until he could coordinate with a federal contact. If they're laundering money, the feds will want a piece of that, he said, and that could give us the upper hand. Sure enough, within days, I received a cryptic phone call from someone identifying himself as Special Agent Luke Hernandez. He explained that the FBI had an open investigation into Magnolia Builders for potential racketeering in multiple states. My heart raced. We arranged a discreet meeting. Luke was direct, stating that they suspected Magnolia had built substandard homes under different HOA banners, then laundered the profits through shell company. Karen's Valley Bloom might be part of a larger web. We'd love your cooperation, Ethan, he said. We can't promise immediate action, but if you give us enough evidence, we can close in on them. That might help you reclaim your property and protect those homeowners, too. The idea of working with the FBI both excited and worried me. I'd have more muscle behind me, but if Karen sensed an investigation was closing in, she might destroy documents or skip town with her ill-gotten gains. We decided to proceed carefully, sharing only selected evidence while continuing to gather more. I agreed to wear a wire if necessary. My background in investigations made me comfortable enough with the risk. As my plan took shape, I realized I needed to draw Karen out, corner her into admitting culpability. She thrived on intimidation, so if I seemed to waver or signal a willingness to negotiate, she might slip up. That's when I called her office, adopting a more resigned tone. "Karen, it's Ethan," I said quietly, letting a tinge of weariness seep through. "I've been thinking. Maybe we can work out a settlement. I don't want to face a lawsuit that might drag on for years. Is there some arrangement we can make so I don't have to tear down everything you've built?" She responded almost immediately. I heard triumph in her voice. "I'm glad to hear you've come to your senses, Ethan. Let's meet in my office tomorrow morning to discuss. I think we can find a solution that benefits everyone." The next day, wearing a small recording device provided by the FBI, I walked into her glass fortress again. She offered me an almost gracious smile this time, guiding me to a lavish conference room. "Coffee? Water? Let's keep this civilized," she said, the corners of her mouth curving in satisfaction. I feigned polite acceptance, sipped water, then got right to the point. "I realize 120 families live here now. I don't want them to lose their homes, and I'm sure you don't want negative press. What if we negotiate a settlement figure? Something to compensate me for the land and keep the community intact." Karen's eyes lit up as she leaned forward. "Yes, that's precisely what I'd hoped you'd say. I was thinking in the realm of, say, $200,000. That's fair, considering how improvements raise the land value for you as well." I forced a bitter laugh. "You built an entire development worth millions, probably tens of millions, and you think 200,000 is fair? I need something more substantial." She pursed her lips, and I noticed a flicker of annoyance. "We might stretch to 400,000, but I'll need you to sign an ironclad agreement relinquishing any further claims. And you'll keep quiet about any alleged improprieties regarding how this came to be. We both know that negative publicity won't help you, nor those who now call Valley Bloom home." Her posture relaxed, as though she believed I'd capitulated. I pretended to mull it over, swirling the ice in my water glass. Maybe I can accept that, with a few conditions. I need to ensure no lawsuits from other parties, and I want official confirmation that the local county endorses all of this." Karen shrugged. "Of course. I'll have our attorney draft the documents. The county's cooperation is already set in stone, if you get my drift. That's how we managed to build so quickly in the first place." She paused, a look of self-satisfaction crossing her features. "You see, you're not the first landowner to come out of the woodwork. I've done this dance before, though never on this scale, I'll admit, but the principle is the same. People can be dealt with if you know the right levers to pull." I kept a neutral expression, despite the anger that stirred in my gut. She had just incriminated herself by implying that this method had been repeated. "I guess you've perfected the system," I said, trying to sound impressed rather than disgusted. Karen nodded smugly. "You could say that. Valley Bloom is my masterpiece. I had a geology survey done, and I know there are profitable resources under certain sections. The real money isn't in the houses themselves, it's in the mineral rights. Once we set up Phase 2 and Phase 3, we'll be unstoppable." She laughed softly, tapping her manicured nails on the table. "But that's not public knowledge, so let's keep it between us. Now, about our settlement. I need your signature and you need my money, so let's get this done before either of us changes our mind." Her admission came out more openly than I ever hoped for. I fought the urge to react, focusing on letting the wire capture every word. "Sure, just let me consult with my lawyer. I won't sign anything without his blessing." Karen's mouth tightened a fraction. "Fine, but don't take too long. My offer has an expiration date. The moment we break ground on the next phase, the land's value multiplies, and I won't be as generous." With the conversation recorded, I left the building, feeling a wave of relief. I quickly drove to the FBI's discreet location, where Agent Hernandez listened intently to the playback. His eyebrows shot up at Karen's bold confessions. "That's gold," he exclaimed, patting me on the shoulder. "We can use that, along with the financial docs you have, to pursue charges for wire fraud, forgery, and potentially extortion. We'll coordinate with the state's attorney general as well." The following days were a flurry of activity. Marcus filed an emergency injunction to halt any further development. The FBI quietly prepared warrants. Meanwhile, I set up a meeting with a local news reporter who had been sniffing around for details. Though I wanted justice, I also wanted to ensure I didn't cause panic among the residents. They deserved to know the truth, but not in a way that would leave them homeless overnight. As everything moved into place, Karen must have sensed a shift. She stopped returning my calls, and I heard from a county contact that she was hastily reviewing her records. She likely planned to shred anything incriminating. But time was no longer on her side. The FBI moved in at dawn, raiding her HOA headquarters, seizing computers and arresting 2 of her close associates. Karen herself was detained outside her lavish home in the wealthiest part of town, ironically nowhere near Valley Bloom. The story hit the news like wildfire. HOA president arrested amid fraud, land theft allegations, blared headlines. Stunned residents learned that the land they lived on had been acquired through forgery and deception. An emergency town hall meeting erupted with both anger and confusion. Many families feared losing their houses if the court voided their deeds. But I took the stage. Flanked by Marcus and a county official, I explained that my goal wasn't to strip people of their homes. I intended to negotiate a fair solution, possibly transferring legitimate ownership to them once all the legal dust settled, ensuring no one lost their life savings. A wave of relief swept the crowd, followed by heartfelt applause. People approached me afterward, tearful, thanking me for handling the situation with compassion. Even Roger, the man with the sprinkler troubles, clasped my hand. "We can't thank you enough for not leaving us out to dry," he said. That moment of genuine gratitude reminded me of why my grandfather cherished this land. It was about people and community, not greed. In the months that followed, a lengthy legal process ensued. Karen faced a slew of charges: fraud, racketeering, forgery, money laundering, and environmental violations for ignoring mandatory impact studies. With the FBI's involvement, investigators discovered she'd orchestrated a broader web of corruption, forging alliances with developers in multiple states, always leveraging legal loopholes to claim unoccupied land. Her associates turned on her in exchange for reduced sentences, providing mountains of incriminating details. One official after another resigned in disgrace or was indicted for taking bribes to expedite her projects. The scandal rattled the entire county, prompting new regulations on how HOAs could form and acquire property. Meanwhile, an environmental survey revealed partial contamination in certain sections of the desert, where Karen had hastily laid foundations without proper assessments. The developer had used cheap materials, risking damage to the local water table. Fortunately, the contamination wasn't extreme, and a remediation fund, partly sourced from Karen's seized assets, covered cleanup costs. The families at Valley Bloom were offered an arrangement. I would legally transfer each home's land title at a fair market rate, minus any fraudulent fees they had initially paid. They'd effectively pay only what they already thought they owned, and no more. My compensation came from settlements with the indicted officials and the developer. It wasn't a windfall, but it returned a sense of justice, and I preserved my grandfather's legacy by ensuring these families weren't punished for Karen's. Standing on the outskirts of Valley Bloom Estates several months later, I watched children bike down the smooth streets without fear. The HOA sign was gone, replaced by a modest banner reading Valley Bloom Neighborhood Association Resident-Led. Karen's era was officially over, replaced by a committee of homeowners who genuinely cared about the community. They had rewritten their bylaws with transparency, ensuring no single individual could ever again hijack the land for personal gain. I took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. Karen's brazen attempt to build 120 homes on my land had ended in her downfall. She'd set her own trap by gloating about the forgery and hidden resources, and I had simply made sure she stepped into it. The principle my grandfather always taught me rang loud in my mind. Justice may be slow, but it's steady. If you stand for what's right, eventually the truth will surface. As for Karen, she now faced a prison sentence that could stretch for decades. The last I heard, her lawyers were negotiating a plea deal, but given the mountain of evidence, she had little room to maneuver. Her empire crumbled the moment she underestimated my resolve to protect my inheritance. One late afternoon, I visited my grandfather's old ranch site, the place that Karen had used as a phantom address. The original structure was gone, replaced by a single desert willow that stood tall. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows. Standing there, I felt his presence as a comforting memory, urging me to move forward. I thought of the heartbreak that might have happened if I had bowed to Karen's intimidation. Instead, I honored his memory by fighting back with the knowledge he'd hoped I would use one day. A soft breeze rustled the branches above. The hush of the desert enveloped me. I inhaled the dry, sun-baked air and exhaled with renewed gratitude. The crisis had brought unexpected blessings, an entire community saved from potential ruin, official corruption exposed, and a blueprint for future reforms in how HOAs acquire land. It felt like the land itself had been returned to its rightful state, a place where families could live honestly, free from the tyranny of greed. After a few silent minutes, I walked to my truck and touched the weathered hood. A sense of closure washed over me. I heard distant laughter from the Valley Bloom neighborhood and allowed myself a small smile. The people there deserved a real home, not a fraudulent promise. They had found an authentic sense of community, ironically birthed by one woman's attempted scheme. The phone in my pocket buzzed. It was Special Agent Hernandez with another update about the federal charges. I answered with a calm confidence I hadn't felt in months, certain we were on the right path to finalize the case. Once the legal proceedings concluded, I'd rest easy knowing that no other unsuspecting landowner would fall into Karen's grasp. I listened for a moment, then replied, "I'm glad to hear it. Let's make sure it sticks this time. No more slipping through cracks." When the call ended, I turned the ignition, the engine rumbling to life. Glancing once more at the peaceful scene, I whispered a promise meant for my grandfather's memory. "We did it, Grandpa. We saved what you loved, we protected it from vultures, and in doing so, we upheld the integrity you always taught me." Then I drove away, the final vestiges of the setting sun illuminating the horizon in brilliant oranges and purples, a fitting tribute to a day when justice had, indeed, been served. Deep inside, I felt an unshakable sense of resolution. The trap Karen had tried to spring on me had, in the end, proven to be her own undoing. And as I headed toward the next chapter of my life, I realized that victory was far sweeter when achieved not through intimidation or underhanded deals, but through tenacity, truth, and a profound respect for the land and people it nurtures.